So it's 4:01, so I think it might be okay to just go ahead and get started. It's going to take just a second to load because it's slow, and then we will be all set.
Yeah, well, while that's loading, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for participating throughout the day, and to those of you who have stuck with us till the near end, or at least the end of our stuff for both coasts. And like Angela said, I apologize due to the childcare crisis, the multifaceted childcare crisis in this country. I have to run in about 10 minutes to get one of our kids off the bus because the other one's daycare now closes an hour earlier than it did last week. But I did want to, and then I'll once I get her, I'll try to rejoin you all. But before that, I wanted to just give you all a little bit of background on the grant that that the symposium is coming out of. So I'm Justin.
I'm losing all of my windows. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. There we are. So I'm Justin Jock. I'm at the University of Michigan, and I started this grant with Angela Zoss, who was the data visualization librarian at Duke and is now an assessment and data visualization analyst there, and Andy Ratowski, who was at UCLA when we started this grant, and now is at USC as a visualization librarian. And just we can, we can leave this slide. This is a good slide for this. So this grant in a lot of ways really grew out of some conversations that the three of us had, mainly starting at IASSIST, the International Association of Social Science and Information Services, Social Science Information Services and Technology. Since it's an international one, I used to practice all the time because as I was going through customs, I always wanted to be able to say what the conference I was going to, because it was sometimes in Canada and sometimes in Europe. But you know, the three of us were sort of involved in, I think, some of the kind of nationally in the US, some of the early discussions about supporting data visualization in libraries. And we came, you know, sort of from different perspectives, but I think for all three of us, it was really important to sort of think critically about data visualization and to focus on teaching. I think there was a lot of various forces, I won't go into it too much, that were really pushing towards a very technology-centered focus on data visualization in terms of the kind of the infrastructure and the instruction. And I think given our backgrounds, we really wanted to take an opportunity to sort of step back and say, you know, I think as has been clear throughout the symposium today, that there's a lot more than just the technology and just teaching tools to teaching data visualization. And we also noted that while IASSIST was a really great place for the three of us, that there were increasingly people doing data visualization work. Not at IASSIST, there was DLF and other conferences, but that data visualization didn't really feel like it had a proper home. And so this grant was both an opportunity for us to sort of develop resources around data visualization in libraries that weren't, you know, focused just on teaching the tools, and then also to try to build a community around doing that. So if we can go to the next slide, and maybe even the one after that. So yeah, our project was really to develop a literacy-based instructional and research agenda for library and information professionals, with the goal of really creating community around data visualization. And some of how that we initially thought that would happen changed a little bit because of COVID, but in a lot of ways, being able to meet virtually with people like this has really been a great way to start developing this community. But one of the things we really wanted to do was sort of seed this community and these discussions through developing a group of fellows. So we, back about 3 years ago, we put out a call for proposals asking for fellows who wanted to be part of this grant to have a little bit of time to do some of their own research, to work collaboratively with other people, And back when going to conferences in person was an option, to meet all in Ann Arbor, as well as to go to some conferences. So we got a bunch, even more applications than we expected. And we selected a number of fellows who I believe are on the next slide. Oh, no, sorry. We also put together, if you go to the next slide, an advisory board who have been incredibly helpful in guiding this project. So I'll just read them really quickly. It's Nancy Bartlett, Marta Brunner, Jonathan Kane, whom you all just met, and sorry about the dog, barking, Makiba Foster, Jason Griffey, Burgess Jules, Thomas Padilla, Miriam Posner, Jennifer Vinopal, and Elaine Westbrooks. And they've been really instrumental in sort of shaping this grant and helping us to get the word out about the work that we're doing. And I think, as you could see from Jonathan's talk, their input has really sort of shaped a lot of our discussion. Okay, and then if we go to the next slide, just really quickly, this was the group of fellows that we accepted. So Nagin Agasabe, Dolores Carlito, David Christensen, Ryan Clement, Sally Gore, Tess Greinock, Joe Klein, Dorothy Ogden, Megan Ozeron, Alyssa Rod, Cass Wilkinson Saldana, Matthew Sisk, and Amy Sonnenschen, who they agreed to work with us for 2 years, and then we asked them to sort of continue their work as we sort of extended the grant throughout the pandemic, and hoped that we would be able to get together in person, but this latest Delta wave has sort of stood in the way of doing that. But we met in Ann Arbor, and then we've sort of continued to in 2019, and then we've continued to work together, creating both resources that are available on our website and sort of various public events such as this one. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Justin, and thanks to Justin's efforts to administer this grant are tireless, and he's much appreciated for doing all that extra work. Andy and I are co-PIs, but the grant is sort of housed out of the University of Michigan, which adds a lot onto Justin's plate. So thanks to him for that. I will take over from here and share a little bit about project activities, which are a broad term for all the work that we've been doing with the fellows and the organizers over the last few years in service of the mission of this grant. Our first project activity, or one of our very first project activities, was to host this meeting in Ann Arbor that I believe Justin alluded to. And in August 2019, we were able to meet in person for the first time, and all the fellows and organizers shared a few days where the fellows did a few lightning talks to talk about some of their preliminary projects, which we'll talk about in just a second. We invited a really fabulous speaker, Lisa Nakamura, who I'm sure many of you have seen speak or know the work of. And that was a really delightful and fascinating talk on the ethics of virtual reality. We were able to do some brainstorming of the grant activities, because while we had an idea as organizers where we thought the grant should go, we built into the grant the idea that the fellows would have a lot of agency about what we work on and what the success of this grant would look like. And so we were able to do some of that work in the Ann Arbor meeting. And then we also began even some of the project work that the groups took on after that. We have a full report and assessment on our website, but I want to delve a little bit more into this first item, the lightning talks and position statements on preliminary projects. So our preliminary projects, these were projects on topics that each fellow proposed as part of their application to be part of the Visualizing the Future cohort. And the topics ranged wildly. They were all really fascinating, and they all showed the places that the fellows were coming from and what was going to be useful to their work and to their communities. And what we were hoping to accomplish with these projects was to give the fellows time to dig a little deeper into a topic of interest, and then also for fellows to learn from each other about those areas of interest. The topics were also intended to feed into some of the later projects of the grant, and we got some feedback. We asked for feedback on this, and this is one of the places where the grant, where we were still finding our legs, and so the preliminary projects didn't always feel quite as fulfilling, I think, to the fellows, but I still look back on them with great interest and pride, and we do have those lightning talks available now on our new YouTube channel. So I'm excited to highlight this work of the fellows who are doing very tricky work while we were trying to get the grant spun up, and they covered many interesting topics, many of which did inspire future work in the grant. And then I'll also mention that at least one of these projects is going to be featured in a lightning talk tomorrow. So in addition to preliminary projects, one of the activities that was brainstormed by the fellows as part of the Ann Arbor meeting was the idea of writing a white paper. And the white paper was intended to summarize the issues that we face in the data and visualization services community in libraries. And so the white paper covered why we even need data visualization support in libraries, what we're able to offer in libraries when we take on data visualization services, what the current environment is for these services, the emphasis that needs to be placed on the people behind these services, the services themselves, and then also the kinds of literacies that our patrons are being asked to build in this information economy these days, and how the libraries can support those literacies. So I'm really very pleased that this effort was undertaken, and I encourage people to take a look. It's an open source publication, so it's very easy to access. An excellent job to the small team who worked on that. Another activity that came out very early in the grant was a collection of materials for new librarians, again, directly related to the work that we did in Ann Arbor. We discovered that almost to a person, those of us who offer visualization services in libraries struggle at being kind of onboarded. Like we're often the only person in our institutions doing what we're doing. There often isn't a model for how to do this work that can be passed down. So many of us were the first people to do this job in our libraries. And so the group was really passionate about developing a set of resources and materials that new librarians could use to onboard and to ramp up for especially that first year of work. And so the goals were to mentor and support new visualization librarians. It covers topics like a roadmap for your first year, people who can be important to you and can help you, and additional resources like places to publish and conferences to go to. It really emphasizes the community, which is something that as a community related to this grant we have found very valuable. And it is part of our suite of GitHub hosted projects, and we're always open to new feedback for additional resources that might be added to that. Another initiative we undertook, especially in response to changes in our work situations as a result of the pandemic, was that we spun up this Vizintel series. And I hope that many of you here have been able to join us for a Vizintel in the past, but we decided that to better support the visualization community and actually build that community, we were all really interested in hosting these large open discussions on a relatively monthly basis, hosting these discussions that we could sit in a room, we could bring others to sit in this room with us, and we could discuss different topics that come up and are of interest to people doing similar work to us. And so I think they've been really successful. We've been gathering and sharing tips and asking questions and just getting to know each other. All the recordings from these Vizintels are shared. Again, we have a new YouTube channel and we have a playlist for the Vizintels The discussion is often summarized in a blog post or in a live notes document that's been maintained, and you can find links to those summaries in the description of the YouTube videos. And we really hope that they'll continue to live on as a resource to the community, but that also will potentially be able to continue that series. For me, one of the primary motivations of this grant was always to be able to compile and distribute instructional modules that would help people in libraries spin up data visualization services faster and more easily. We all know that sometimes these services are being added to existing positions as well as being new positions that are created. And we really hoped that we could bring this fantastic group of people together and kind of collect our expertise and our resources and be able to give that back to the community in the form of instructional modules. And I'm happy to say, as of this week, our final set of instructional modules on the Data Visualization 101 has been released. So we now have a kind of standalone workshop on ethics and data visualization, and then a series of 10 separate small modules that cover different topics in Data Visualization 101. I want to congratulate and thank everybody who is part of that effort over the last essentially 2 years to try to make that happen. And I feel like it's been a really successful effort. So we now have these teaching materials that are really designed for people in library positions to deliver the content in the kinds of settings that we typically teach our learners. And so it's not just the kind of content that we tend to deliver in libraries and the way that we tend to deliver them in sort of one-shot workshops or in workshops where we don't necessarily know the audience in advance. But it's also the kinds of topics that we really want to focus on. It covers topics that are focused much more on critical visualization literacy skills rather than tool-based learning. And so to have so much content finally released into the wild is a real treat for me, and I appreciate all the effort that went into that. We also have a lightning talk on that tomorrow, and so I'll be so excited to see Tess kind of walk everyone through the materials we have. One additional component of teaching that is often a barrier for people who are starting to offer visualization service in libraries is that to build teaching around data or visualization, it's really crucial to have the right kinds of data sets or the right visualization examples to be able to highlight the kinds of concepts that we're trying to teach people when it comes to critical visualization skills. And so from, again, this meeting in Ann Arbor where we were brainstorming what counts as success for this grant and what kinds of things would have helped us when we were starting our jobs, the idea of collecting and sharing the examples that make sense for teaching data and visualization came up right away. And so we did spend some efforts over the last couple of years to create a repository to share these types of examples, and I'll be excited. I'll be sharing a lightning talk on that tomorrow. So we'll get into more details on that tomorrow. And then finally, one of the major activities of this grant has been this communication and community organization process that we've been trying to build out. And so this is actually a national forum grant. And so the goal of the grant is to collect people. And we started that process with the organizers and the advisory board and then the fellows. And now for the last year, I feel like we've really been trying to have our community encircle as many people as we can get to come to our event. So you're all part of that. We appreciate it. We've been doing that work by trying to distribute things widely on our website, by trying to keep people engaged by using a mailing list to distribute our resources to people who have opted into the mailing list. We've started a Slack channel just in case people want to have real-time conversation in conjunction with some of our events. And now we've taken the recordings from our events and our projects and have begun sharing them on YouTube, where again, we hope to be able to continue to engage the community. These public events have been really important to this mission of building the community. And so having regular gatherings where we can see each other virtually at least, and have ongoing discussions. And then finally this large symposium where we get to all actually reserve some time to learn from each other and to gather have all been just a really fulfilling part of the grant for me, and I hope have helped further our mission. We know that the grant work is kind of ongoing, and that what we have done here might benefit others, both in terms of what we've accomplished and what we've learned. And so I'm going to hand over to Andy for some lessons learned.
Thank you. Thank you both Angela and Justin for setting this up, but for kind of getting us to this reflection part. In sort of in terms of this, I just want to take a few minutes, reflect on the work really kind of more generally, and really even kind of talk about some things that are kind of harder to quantify, share some of the challenges that we face, some of those lessons that we've learned, and then kind of reiterate a couple of some of the next steps for the immediate future. So one incredibly important reflection, and this is from all of us as organizers, and Angela really kind of highlighted this, is sort of how our open and oftentimes sort of more casual discussions between ourselves as organizers and with all the fellows have been some of the most sort of rewarding aspects of this work. And I think it's really about just having this space for monthly meetings with fellows, weekly meetings with ourselves, kind of creating and allowing for deeper, richer conversations on these topics that are important to us. And I think, you know, one thing, again, really hard to kind of quantify, it's really hard to do this even sometimes in our own work environments with other colleagues. And so just having this, this kind of opportunity has been really amazing. And I think it really changes your perspectives and sort of the impact. It's going to be sort of a long lasting impact years after this grant has finished. In part, these conversations that we've had, they've served as obviously as inspiration, as Angela was pointing out, for beginning our Vizintel sessions. And there's going to be a lightning talk and an entire session on that tomorrow. It's also been rewarding to adapt and work with the fellows throughout the grant period and let them really help to shape and guide the goals and outputs of the grant. As organizers, we spend a lot of time thinking through what kind of infrastructure and support will be best for the group and the work that we need to do. But the fellows have really brought a lot of creativity. They've helped to shape the work into something that I think we all agree it just has impact, a larger impact than if it was just us. Another thing, and you know, can't kind of emphasize this enough, it's been so incredibly important personally and professionally for us as organizers to be considering our work in this context of COVID and this ongoing pandemic. And one of the aims of the grant obviously has been to facilitate dialogue and conversation among librarians doing work in visualization, and to create this community in which we can support our work. And what I think you know, we're all just incredibly proud of in this grant so far is how we've been able to come together, be supportive, be flexible, recognize the seriousness of the difficulties and challenges of everything that's been happening the past you know, months, and kind of continuing happening, and being able to do all this and supporting each other. And really as a team and cohort, growing together, this group has just been incredibly caring and thoughtful together. Next slide, please. So how about some of the challenges? And we've really had, I think, some compelling challenges that are worth talking about. One of the biggest hurdles has been to make really meaningful connections with public institutions. I think that there are a lot of reasons why we have not been as successful trying to sort of do this. And we kind of, you know, keep returning to it, trying to find inroads. And it's really one of those things that is much harder to do than I think we had anticipated. Something else, and this is quite related, is also going sort of beyond our cohort and making collaborations and partnerships with other groups. I think it's just sort of been, you know, much harder, and you know, pandemic, no pandemic, it's just one thing that, you know, you can't sort of underestimate that kind of challenge. One thing that, you know, we've all kind of struggled at times with is reserving and protecting time for the grant work, managing a grant and having a cohort, and really us as organizers, almost exclusively early career professionals, I think there's a difficult reality about demands, both personal, professional, and those were constantly present, and kind of selecting and reserving time has been a big thing that we've been working with and on. And then finally, we feel that we need to sort of acknowledge as co-PIs that we'd really hope to facilitate our fellows' initial project work. In a way, we traded priorities for more group and collective work over those individual projects. But I think for all of us, one of the exciting aspects of this grant originally was to sort of make space for that personal research. And that is one thing that I think we could have worked on, or it was just a real challenge to kind of make that happen more. So next slide. Actually, go back one slide, I think. The lessons learned. So the first one, and this is quite serious, but I'll kind of just say it lightly. Obviously, don't have a grant during a pandemic, and I think for anyone who wants to kind of ask questions, or maybe we can talk a little bit more about this. But it's just one of those things that it's so obvious that this pandemic has just left a huge impact on this grant and the work that we've done in having to react and refigure so many of our outcomes and objectives because of it. Though we might not have been able to maybe do as many collaborations and partnerships beyond our cohort as much as we would have liked, one thing that we've really want to share is that within the cohort, we have a really active and connected community where we're kind of constantly learning from one another, and we have really effective groups who are working on different topics and themes. So kind of so that has been working within our grant ourselves. One theme of the grant that has really emerged, and we've all become sort of more attuned to it, I think, is making our work more accessible. And this is something that many of the fellows were interested in a very practical way when we started the grant in our visualization work and creating visualizations. But I think with this emphasis now on virtual, online sort of work and spaces, I think this idea of accessibility has been broadened, and I think it's just become much more practical. So that's really become a lot more part of everybody's work. Something else that I think really been learning and sort of through practice really is being flexible. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of groups and in a lot of situations we really pay lip service to wanting to be flexible and wanting to be reactive, etc. But really through repetition and necessity, we've gotten very good at working together to reprioritize our goals, making projects more tangible, and trying to broaden and make this grant more impactful and vital by being flexible. And then we've kind of really built that in, and it's really been something that I'm really glad as a group we've been able to do. And one last sort of interesting lesson, and it's just something that we've talked quite a bit about as organizers, is because of the length of the grant, we've had fellows in our cohort accept new positions, grow professionally, personally. And we hope sort of in part that the grant was able to help in some of those professional endeavors, but also we just hope that this grant was able to sort of support professional and personal sort of growth. And again, I think this is one of those things that it's really harder to quantify how successful or how impactful the grant sort of is in those sorts of spaces. But really, the more we kind of saw that happening, I think we were also trying to make the grant allow that to happen, allow it to facilitate that kind of growth. So we can go to the last slide. And this is really just a couple of very quick things before we really get into some questions and discussion if we have that, is just sort of sharing some immediate next steps. Angela already mentioned the Vizintel. So tomorrow we will have a Vizintel about Vizintel. We want to talk more about this and sort of we really want to consider what the future of these Vizintels might look like beyond this grant. And we really want this, we want everybody to sort of have a say in this, be a part of this if possible. So please join us for that Vizintel. And there's also a lightning talk, so you can kind of learn a little bit more of the backstory about the Vizintel there. And then in our immediate sort of, again, future, interacting with these instructional modules. So we have a YouTube channel. There are lots of videos. We have Data Visualization 101, Ethics in Data Visualization. We would love for you to interact with these, use them, give us feedback while you're here during the public symposium, and share them and talk about them. So I am going to stop there. I think we can go to the next, the Q&A slide. And I think if people are interested, we would love to kind of continue this with the discussion.
Thanks so much, Andy. So we're happy to take any questions. We're happy to walk through anything else related to our grant activities and projects.
And there is a question from Patricia. Is accessibility here used to mean discoverable and open access, or accessibility for people with disabilities?
And I would argue both. I would, argue we're trying definitely on both fronts. I'd say we're maybe more focused on accessibility for people with disabilities than we are with making it widely known. We definitely are trying to put everything we do out in the public, but we're maybe not great at outreach. So I don't know that we're like advertising it well, but it's been a high priority for this grant to have to be thinking about accessibility throughout. So whether that's live captioning our public events or going back through and hand captioning for most, if not almost all of our videos, trying to get past just auto captioning, trying to make sure that our teaching materials, all the files are accessible to a screen reader at the very least. Color contrast. So I think our design is trying to take into account best practices for accessibility. I want to just reiterate, I'm seeing thanks in the chat, and we want to thank all of you too, because there are things that would not have worked without our community. So our Vizintels are only a success because of the people who have been attending and have been sharing their thoughts and having discussions. And none of this grant work would be possible without our fellows and our advisory boards and my co-organizers. Yeah, okay, additional questions. Are there plans in the works for future grants on data visualization? That's an excellent question. We're still trying to finish this one. You know, the grant was originally supposed to end last year, and we asked for a no-cost extension because almost all of our budget was earmarked for travel, because travel is expensive. But when you don't have to travel, you have to find other ways to spend that money, and we have had trouble spending all of our money. So so we are still trying to be creative about how to repurpose our funds so that we're accomplishing the same mission. I don't think either of my organizers has mentioned an immediate new grant effort, but we're happy to talk with anybody who's curious about our experiences and advise.
Yeah, and I think, so things have gotten a little bit more hectic here, but I'll try to just add really quickly to that. I mean, I think we'd really like to continue to see, we'd like to see this work continue, but we'd like it to continue, you know, as part of maybe a larger community now. So if anyone, just to reiterate, I guess what Angela said, if anyone is really interested in this work, we would be more than happy to collaborate and advise and suggest things, because I think there's so much more work to be done, and so anyone who would like to be part of that, we'd love to see that happen. So if you're interested in submitting or even being part of a grant to continue some of this work, please reach out to us. We can put you in touch with other people, because yeah, we really want this to be a launching pad for larger community efforts around data visualization in libraries.
Yeah, I'm loving these ideas in chat. And I want to make sure we cover the what's next question as well, which in some ways we're addressing here by saying maybe what's next is not an immediate new grant, but I do think that for me, what's next is trying to figure out how to keep this community alive. I think the initial burst of new visualization services in libraries may be over, but I don't see this community, I don't see libraries backing away from visualization. And I think this community continues to say to me that we don't have a space yet, that there's still not an obvious conference that we all go to. There's still not an obvious listserv we're all attached to. I think there's still something here where we benefit a lot from being able to connect to each other, and we don't necessarily have a formal way of doing that. So that for me is where I'm going next, is to try to keep the community alive.
Yeah, I'll just quickly echo, and I think we talked quite a bit where immediate future is really kind of just further publicizing this and kind of putting it out there, and especially with the Vizintel, like I think we all sort of see that as a place for continued sort of community conversation. Again, kind of that thought where part of that Vizintel idea was we were having these great conversations during our meetings, and we should have this be a part, like everybody should be a part of these conversations. Like we should kind of really put it out there and trying to continue that. And also one thing I've kind of, considered with this is, do we need funding? Like what kind of funding model do we need to kind of continue a Vizintel? And is this something that is worth our volunteer and our efforts? Do we enjoy this enough to just sort of do this because we want it? That's just one thing that I kind of, next steps, like I'm really, that really kind of excites me and challenges me to think like, yeah, this is something I really value. And maybe, we don't necessarily need a grant to kind of continue this, that part at least.
So I see a hand, and also just I'll reiterate a comment from the chat that more focus on non-academic library folk who are having trouble finding their way in data viz world. We would love that. And yeah, maybe again, maybe the Vizintel series, if we build it, they will come. Maybe if we have that as the topic, it will really be possible to gather those people together in the same room. But maybe Mike, are you?
Hey, yeah. This was really exciting to see. Thank you for your report, and big fan of all this work. So yeah, thanks again. I'm really interested in the community question too. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on. Sorry, I don't know exactly how to frame the question, but I think like since your grant started, what I've seen is a lot of interest in data visualization become kind of subsumed, for lack of a better word, in this larger umbrella of data science on campus. Just a lot of data science initiatives starting up. It's the sexy thing to see on campus. So I guess I'm wondering, how do you see these continued community development efforts in relation to energy around data science and academia?
Oh, it's such a good question. I'm going to make you answer it too, as well as anybody in the room. It came up to me, Jonathan, in your keynote. Again, you covered so many of these topics, and as you were talking about whether people are getting this kind of content through credit-bearing courses or through non-credit-bearing sequences that we host in the library. At Duke, we have something called Plus DS, where they were trying to like leave people in their disciplines, but like teach them, take data science to them. it's really, yeah, it's been an interesting shift and evolution of the space. And I'm definitely curious what's happening at other institutions, but we did go from kind of nobody having data viz to everybody having a little bit of data viz because they were all trying to do data science. But is data viz, like, what does that data viz look like when it comes from a lens of data science? And is that enough? And I'm just posing more questions, but my answer would be no, of course not. We need we need more. But curious what other people think. Like, to me, when data viz happens in data science, it's a very different kind of viz than I would teach a first year humanities course, or you know, I mean, maybe even a medical, you know, approach, like who your audience is and what your goals are for visualization, and what ethics come into play differ a lot on your discipline. One of the things we maybe wanted to do with the instructional modules was have discipline specific intros to data visualization, and we just don't have time or capacity for that right now. But I still think it matters where you're coming from, and I worry that the data science approach is maybe giving short shrift to both the ethics side and maybe even the creativity side. Like, I worry that people are learning just the tools, and this whole grant has been hopefully going beyond the tools. Yeah.
Dorothy, go ahead.
I had just a quick response to that because I'm exploring some data science topics as well. And I think, to me, it's a place where this gets to be incredibly crucial in the work from this grant, because what tends to happen from the data science side is people will learn the model and make it put out a visualization. It's not necessarily the best visualization. And I think that's where the critical literacy piece comes in terms of the one unit might be doing the data science and applying the model and doing the output, but then the interpretation is up to everyone, and the skills to interpret that and be able to interrogate it without having that robust background, because not everyone does, not everyone is going to, I think is really important. And I think that's where these intersect so well.
Yeah, any other thoughts? I mean, Mike, what are you seeing? Are you seeing a major shift in how I mean, you have so many campus-wide kind of analytics initiatives these days that, but the library seems pretty well entrenched in that. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm the data experience manager at NC State University, and just this last July, we launched a data science academy on campus, and the choice of it being an academy as opposed to a college or a school or a department was intentional. That word academy is supposed to connote working across departments, and that data science is for everybody. And they teach, they're teaching a 1 credit hour visualization course this semester that's open to anybody. But yeah, I agree with your sentiment, Angela, that there's maybe something here that's more related to kind of what Jonathan was talking about in terms of basic competencies that is not as related to a kind of data science approach where visualization is an analysis tool for kind of understanding big data or looking at big data. So I think we can keep going deep on, especially these comments about ethical visualization. It's really great to see your course and ways that we can approach design that are useful and independent of data science. So I don't think that we would, at NC State anyway, stop that work anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, what it also brings to mind for me is it's reductive to think that the only pipeline issue is getting getting a wide variety of people into Google. You know, it's not just that, it's actually that data science is everywhere now. So, you know, I do work with a community orchestra, you know, they have data, everybody's got data. And so these competency-based approaches to intro to data and the things that libraries can offer, and the welcoming environment, and the we don't expect you to come with any preconceived ideas of data, any background, and we don't expect you to want to go into a high-paced, you know, fast-paced, high risk kind of data job, is exactly a literacy approach. We're teaching you data for everyday life too. You know, this is something that I think is going to be built into so many jobs now. You know, my sister's an editor, and she has to do data work. Like, there's nothing, you don't have to be a programmer to need these skills. And so I like that the library still has kind of a role to play in that as well. Nice. We have a cool comment in the chat. That's a great question. Thank you. And I encourage us to all to keep thinking about that. But as far as I'm concerned, you know, there's still demand. There still seems like plenty of demand for the kinds of things that we teach in libraries. And I really enjoy that there's a community passionate enough to keep trying to teach these things. We're over time. Oh no, we scheduled to 4:45, and I think our hope for this symposium is that we stick to our times. So that's all I have for today. But I do want to put up our schedule slide for tomorrow and encourage everyone to take advantage of we'll have another social hour for people on the East Coast starting at 11, because that was really exciting today and well attended. So bringing in an early lunch or a late brunch and join us, and we'll hang out. We'll have lightning talks at the 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock hour. We'll have a Vizintel at 10, which again, we hope everyone will join us in brainstorming what to do next. We'll have a nice little break and / unconference session in the middle of the day. We'll have our final invited speaker later in the afternoon, and then we'll have a little wrap up and close out with everyone after that. Plus a final social event for West Coast people. Thank you all for attending, and take some time off this afternoon / evening, or stay on the call for the West Coast meet and greet / tea time that'll happen in 10 minutes.
Thank you, everybody, so much. Thank you, Angela.
Great to see everyone. Thank you.